Alone and desperate, Eliza sat in her cabin as the blizzard raged outside, clutching her newborn twins close. Her only lifeline, Samuel, was gone, leaving her with dwindling supplies and no hope in sight. The cold seeped through the old walls. No strength, no warmth, just the relentless wind and her own despair. She felt her resolve crumbling, ready to surrender to the storm. But then a shadow appeared in the doorway, calm, determined, and offering a lifeline. She thought all was lost. But destiny had other plans. Before we start, share where you're watching from and subscribe if you believe in unexpected rescues. In the heart of the Texas frontier, Eliza Cartwright faced a harsh winter. The snowstorm outside her cabin was unforgiving. Her husband, Samuel, had died a week ago in an accident while searching for food. Now, Eliza was alone with her newborn twins, Nathan and Grace. The cabin was old and creaky, barely holding against the fierce wind. The woodpile was low and the fire was small. Eliza was exhausted and worried. She wrapped her children in blankets, trying to keep them warm. The storm howled outside, making the cabin feel even smaller. The wind pushed against the walls and Eliza could hear the wood groan. She felt trapped. She had never known loneliness like this. Every sound outside filled her with fear. She worried about wolves, but she knew the cold was a bigger threat. She had to keep the fire going, but her strength was fading. Eliza sat on the floor near the fireplace, holding her twins close. Nathan and Grace were quiet, their small faces peeking out from the blankets. They were the reason she had to stay strong. She couldn't let despair take over. She had to find a way to survive for their sake. The storm seemed endless. Hours passed and the wind showed no sign of stopping. Eliza's eyes felt heavy, but she fought to stay awake. She couldn't afford to fall asleep and let the fire die. She had to keep her children warm. The thought of them suffering was unbearable. As the day turned to night, Eliza's hope dwindled. She had never felt so isolated. The nearest settlement was miles away, and with the storm, it was impossible to reach. She thought of Samuel and missed him deeply. He had always been the strong one, the one who knew what to do. Without him, she felt lost. Eliza's thoughts were interrupted by a noise outside. Her heart raced. It wasn't the wind or the creaking of the cabin. It was something different. She listened closely, her breath caught in her throat. She heard it again, a soft thud like someone walking in the snow. Fear gripped her. She looked at the door, unsure of what to do. If it was wolves, she had no way to fight them off. She had no weapon, and even if she did, she wasn't sure she could use it. Her mind raced, thinking of all the terrible possibilities. But then the door opened slowly. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. A figure stood in the doorway, snow swirling around them. It was a man, tall and wrapped in furs. He stepped inside, closing the door against the wind. Eliza held her breath, unsure of who he was or what he wanted. The man looked at Eliza and his eyes seemed kind. He was a Comanche hunter and his name was Chayton. Eliza knew of the Comanche but had never met one. She had heard stories, some good, some bad. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she knew she had little choice. Chayton looked around the cabin, taking in the scene. He saw the dying fire and the exhausted woman holding her children. He understood their plight. Despite the language barrier, he made it clear he was there to help. He moved carefully, showing no threat. Eliza watched as Chayton approached the fire. He reached into a pouch and pulled out some herbs. He tossed them onto the flames and they crackled to life. The fire grew brighter, filling the room with warmth. Eliza felt a wave of relief wash over her. The immediate danger of the cold had passed, at least for now. Chayton's presence was reassuring, yet mysterious. Eliza didn't know why he was there, but she was grateful. She didn't have the strength to question his motives. For now, she had to trust him. As the night wore on, Eliza watched Chayton work. He moved around the cabin with confidence, checking the walls and windows. He seemed to know what he was doing, and it gave Eliza a small sense of security. She could feel her body relaxing, the tension easing from her shoulders. Chayton's presence was a mystery. He had appeared out of nowhere, like a guardian sent by fate. Eliza didn't know what had brought him to her door, but she was thankful. She needed help, and he had arrived just in time. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside, the cabin felt safer. Eliza watched the flames dance, casting shadows on the walls. Her children were asleep now, their small bodies warm against her. She felt a glimmer of hope, something she hadn't felt in days. As the night deepened, Eliza allowed herself to think of the future. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The frontier was a harsh place, and she was alone with 2 babies. But with Chayton's unexpected arrival, she felt a little less alone. She didn't know what the coming days would bring, but she was determined to face them. The storm was fierce, but it would eventually pass. Eliza knew she had to be strong, not just for herself, but for Nathan and Grace. They needed her, and she couldn't let them down. With Chayton's help, she hoped to find a way through this dark time. As the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the cabin walls, Eliza felt a sense of calm. The worst of the storm had passed, and she had survived the night. Chayton's presence, though unexpected, had been a blessing. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. The wind outside was still strong, but it no longer seemed as threatening. Eliza knew the challenges of the frontier would continue, but she was ready to face them. With her children at her side and Chayton's help, she felt a new resolve. The path forward would be difficult, but she was determined to walk it. Together, they would find a way to survive and build a new life in this wild land. As the storm eased its grip on the small cabin, Eliza felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. The man who had entered her life so unexpectedly was now a part of her world. Chayton, the Comanche hunter, moved with purpose and calm. His eyes were dark and thoughtful, and he seemed to understand the gravity of their situation. Eliza watched him closely, still unsure of what to make of him. His presence was both comforting and mysterious. She had so many questions but no way to ask them. The language barrier was a challenge, yet there was something in his demeanor that eased her fears. He seemed genuine in his intent to help. Chayton made himself useful at once. He moved around the cabin, reinforcing the walls with extra wood he found outside. He checked the roof for leaks and bolstered the windows against the cold. His actions were purposeful and skilled, and Eliza felt a small burden lift from her shoulders. With each task he completed, the cabin felt more like a refuge and less like a trap. Eliza realized that Chayton was their ally in this harsh world. She had little choice but to trust him, and his actions spoke of good intentions. As the day wore on, Chayton prepared a meal from the meager supplies left in the cabin. He used herbs and roots he carried with him, mixing them into a simple stew. The aroma filled the cabin, reminding Eliza of warmth and safety. For the first time in days, Eliza felt a flicker of hope. She watched her children as they slept, their small faces peaceful and unaware of the dangers outside. Nathan and Grace were her world, and she needed to protect them. Chayton's presence gave her the strength to keep going. Chayton and Eliza worked together in silence, learning from each other through gestures and shared tasks. Eliza showed him where the supplies were kept, and he taught her how to stretch them further. They communicated without words, understanding each other's needs through simple actions. As the day turned to evening, Eliza and Chayton sat by the fire. The warmth was comforting, and the crackling flames filled the silence between them. Eliza wanted to know more about Chayton, about why he was there and what had brought him to her door. She sensed he had a story, one that was as complex as her own. Chayton seemed to read her thoughts. He pointed to himself and then gestured outside, towards the vast wilderness that surrounded them. He was trying to explain. He mimed walking and then pointed to the ground as if to say he had been wandering. Eliza nodded, understanding that he was an outcast of some sort, seeking redemption or a new path. Eliza felt a pang of empathy. She, too, was searching for a way forward in a world that felt foreign and unkind. She wished she could speak his language to offer him the same comfort he had given her. But in the absence of words, she offered him the only thing she could, her trust. The night was calm, and Eliza felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since Samuel's death. Chayton's presence had changed something within her. She was not alone anymore, and that simple fact gave her strength. She glanced at her sleeping children and knew she had to keep fighting for them. Chayton's eyes met hers, and he nodded as if acknowledging the silent promise they had made to each other. They would face whatever challenges came their way together. The storm had tested them, but it had also forged a bond between them, one built on necessity and mutual respect. The next morning, Chayton rose early. He gestured to Eliza, indicating that he wanted to show her something. She wrapped the twins in warm blankets and followed him outside. The air was crisp and cold, but the storm had passed, leaving a blanket of snow that glistened in the early light. Chayton led Eliza to a nearby grove of trees. He demonstrated how to find edible plants and roots, pointing out which ones were safe to eat. Eliza watched carefully, eager to learn. This knowledge could mean the difference between survival and hardship. They returned to the cabin, their arms full of gathered food. Eliza felt a sense of accomplishment. She was learning to adapt, to thrive in this harsh land. With Chayton's help, she was gaining the skills she needed to protect her family. Each day brought new challenges, but also new victories. As the sun set, Eliza and Chayton sat by the fire once more. The twins were asleep, their small forms curled under the blankets. The cabin felt warmer, more like a home. Eliza felt gratitude for Chayton's presence. He had arrived at her darkest hour, bringing light and hope. Eliza knew the dangers were far from over. The wilderness was unforgiving and the men who sought the map were still out there. But she was no longer afraid. With Chayton by her side, she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they would protect Nathan and Grace. Together, they would build a new future. The bond between Eliza and Chayton grew stronger with each passing day. They learned to communicate through simple words and actions, bridging the gap between their worlds. Eliza found herself relying on him, his quiet strength a source of comfort. As the weeks went by, the cabin became a sanctuary. Eliza and Chayton worked together to make it more secure, gathering supplies and preparing for whatever challenges the winter might bring. They formed a partnership, one based on trust and necessity. Eliza knew she could not stay hidden forever. The world outside was dangerous, but it was also full of possibilities. With Chayton's help, she was determined to face it. She had lost much, but she had also gained a new ally, a new friend. The storm had brought them together, and now they were ready to face the future. Eliza looked at her children, at the life they had built together, and felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead would be hard, but she was not alone. With Chayton by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. Eliza and Chayton settled into a routine. Each day, they worked together to gather food and keep the cabin secure. The storm had passed, but the threat of winter still lingered. They needed to ensure they had enough supplies to last until spring. Chayton taught Eliza how to find food in the forest. He showed her which plants were safe to eat and how to track small game. Eliza was a quick learner. She knew these skills were vital. With each lesson, she felt more capable, more prepared for the challenges ahead. Eliza and Chayton communicated with simple words and gestures. They shared stories of their pasts using basic language and signs. Eliza spoke of Samuel, her late husband, and the life they had dreamed of building on the frontier. She spoke of the map Samuel had kept hidden, a map that marked a spring in the territory. It was a secret, one that could change everything. Chayton listened intently. He understood the importance of the map. Water was life, and a spring could mean power. He vowed to protect Eliza and her children. The land was dangerous, and there were others who would seek the map for their own gain. Despite the challenges, Eliza felt a sense of peace. She had formed a bond with Chayton, one that was strong and resilient. Together, they had faced the harsh winter. Together, they had survived. But Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. She often felt eyes watching them from the forest. It was a quiet presence, lurking just out of sight. She mentioned it to Chayton, who nodded in understanding. He too had noticed the signs. One morning, while gathering wood, they discovered tracks in the snow. The prints were fresh, leading away from the cabin and into the woods. Eliza's heart raced. Someone or something was following them. Chayton studied the tracks, his expression serious. They had to be cautious. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard. The cabin, while secure, was not impenetrable. They needed to be vigilant. As they returned to the cabin, Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. The tracks were a reminder that danger was close. She couldn't let her guard down, not with Nathan and Grace to protect. They were her world, and she would do anything to keep them safe. The days passed quickly, each one bringing new challenges. Eliza and Chayton continued their routine, always mindful of their surroundings. They fortified the cabin, making sure it was secure against intruders. They took turns keeping watch at night, ready to sound the alarm if needed. Despite the constant vigilance, Eliza found moments of joy. She watched her children grow, their laughter filling the cabin with warmth. Nathan and Grace were her light, and their innocence gave her strength. They reminded her of the life she was fighting for. Chayton was a constant presence, his quiet strength a source of comfort. He had become a part of their family, and Eliza was grateful for his friendship. Together, they faced each day with determination, ready to protect what they had built. But the sense of being watched never left Eliza. It was a shadow always lurking at the edges of her mind. She knew they had to find out who or what was following them. They couldn't live in fear, always looking over their shoulders. One afternoon, Eliza and Chayton set out to follow the tracks. They moved quietly, careful not to make noise. The forest was silent, the trees standing like sentinels around them. The tracks led them deeper into the woods, winding through the underbrush. As they walked, Eliza thought of the map of the spring it marked. It was a secret, one that could change the fate of the territory. She wondered if the person following them knew about it. If they were after the map, it meant danger was closer than she had thought. Chayton stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. Eliza froze, her heart pounding in her chest. They listened, straining to hear any sound. The forest was still, the only noise the rustle of leaves in the wind. Then they heard it, a branch snapping in the distance. Someone was nearby. Eliza and Chayton exchanged a glance, understanding passing between them. They had to be careful. They couldn't risk a confrontation, not without knowing who they were dealing with. Slowly, they retreated, moving back towards the cabin. Eliza's mind raced with possibilities, each one more frightening than the last. She couldn't let fear take over. She had to stay strong, for her children, for Chayton, for herself. Back at the cabin, they discussed their next steps. They couldn't stay hidden forever. They needed to find out who was following them and why. The map was a secret, but it was also a danger. They had to protect it and themselves at all costs. The night was long, the darkness pressing against the walls of the cabin. Eliza lay awake, her mind turning over everything they had learned. The tracks, the map, the figure in the woods, it was all connected. She knew they had to be ready for whatever came next. Chayton sat by the fire, keeping watch. His presence was reassuring, a reminder that she was not alone. Together, they would face the challenges ahead. Together, they would protect Nathan and Grace. The path was uncertain, but they were ready to walk it side by side. As dawn broke, Eliza felt a renewed sense of determination. The challenges were great, but so was their resolve. They had come this far, and they would not be defeated. The land was harsh, but it was also full of promise. With Chayton by her side, she was ready to face whatever the future held. Together, they would find a way. Eliza and Chayton continued their days with a constant awareness of the lurking danger. The tracks in the snow had been a warning, and they both knew they had to stay alert. The cabin was their sanctuary, but it was also a target. They had to be prepared for anything. One morning, as they were gathering wood near the edge of the forest, they heard something. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy and purposeful. Eliza's heart pounded. She and Chayton exchanged a quick look, their silent communication now second nature. They hurried back to the cabin, carrying the wood with them. Once inside, Chayton barred the door and checked the windows. They both knew what the sounds meant. Someone was coming, and it wasn't the friendly kind of visit. It wasn't long before their fears were confirmed. A group of men appeared at the edge of the clearing. There were 4 of them, rough-looking and armed. They approached the cabin with a sense of authority, as if they had every right to be there. Eliza's mind raced. She recognized the leader from descriptions Samuel had given. It was Wyatt, a man known for doing the dirty work of powerful landowners. He had a reputation for being ruthless and was often employed by those who sought control over the land. Wyatt shouted for them to come out, his voice carrying a threat. Eliza felt a cold fear grip her, but she knew they couldn't show weakness. Chayton stood beside her, calm and ready. His presence gave her strength. The men demanded the map, claiming they worked for someone who wanted it badly. Eliza knew they had to be after the spring, the one Samuel had marked on the map. It was valuable, and they would stop at nothing to get it. Chayton motioned for Eliza to stay back. He approached the door cautiously, speaking in a clear, firm voice. He told the men to leave, that they were not welcome here. But Wyatt laughed, a harsh sound that sent shivers down Eliza's spine. The standoff was tense. Eliza watched from inside, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew Chayton was skilled, but they were outnumbered. She feared for him, for her children, for the life they had built in this small cabin. Wyatt and his men grew impatient. They demanded entry, their voices louder, more threatening. Chayton stood his ground, refusing to back down. He was a protector, and he would not let them take what was not theirs. The tension broke when one of the men drew his weapon. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. Chayton moved swiftly, his reflexes honed by years of hunting and survival. He disarmed the man with a quick motion, sending him tumbling to the ground. The other men hesitated, unsure of their next move. Chayton's skill was evident, and they knew they faced a formidable opponent. Wyatt, however, was undeterred. He ordered his men to attack, seeing no other way to get what they wanted. The fight was quick and brutal. Chayton's experience showed as he defended the cabin with precision and strength. Eliza watched in awe and terror, her heart in her throat. She had never seen such skill, such determination. Despite their numbers, the outlaws were no match for Chayton's prowess. He fought with a ferocity that left them scrambling. One by one, they fell back, realizing they had underestimated him. In the chaos, one of the men managed to escape, running back into the woods. Eliza knew this wasn't over. The man would return with more, and their safety was far from secure. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. Wyatt, now alone, retreated with a promise to return. His eyes were cold, filled with anger and determination. He would not give up easily. Eliza knew they had to prepare for his return to be ready for the next wave of attack. As the dust settled, Eliza and Chayton took stock of their situation. The cabin was intact, but the threat was ever present. They had defended their home, but they knew the danger was far from over. Eliza felt a mix of relief and fear. They had survived the encounter, but the knowledge of what was at stake weighed heavily on her. She had to protect her children to ensure their safety in this wild land. Chayton was a steadfast presence, his calm demeanor reassuring. He had proven himself a true ally, a protector in the truest sense. Eliza was grateful for his strength, for his willingness to stand by her side. Together, they fortified the cabin, preparing for the challenges ahead. They knew Wyatt would return, perhaps with more men, more weapons. They had to be ready to stand firm against whatever came their way. Eliza felt a renewed sense of determination. She would not let fear control her. She had fought too hard, come too far to give up now. With Chayton by her side, she was ready to face whatever the future held. The map was a burden, a secret that could change everything. But it was also a key to their survival, to a future they could build together. Eliza and Chayton knew they had to protect it, to keep it safe from those who would use it for greed and power. As night fell, Eliza sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. The warmth was comforting, a reminder that they had survived another day. She looked at her children, at Chayton, and felt a deep sense of purpose. They were a family bound by circumstance and choice. Together, they would weather the storms, face the dangers, and build a life in this wild land. The path was uncertain, but they were ready to walk it side by side, with hope and courage in their hearts. After the encounter with Wyatt and his men, Eliza and Chayton knew they had to leave the cabin. Staying put was too dangerous. They had to find a safer place, somewhere Wyatt couldn't reach them easily. The cabin had been their sanctuary, but now it felt exposed. Eliza packed what little they had, gathering supplies and essentials. She worked quickly, her mind focused on keeping Nathan and Grace safe. The cabin held memories, both joyful and painful, but she couldn't let sentimentality cloud her judgment. Their safety was the priority. Chayton helped with the preparations. He gathered weapons, checked their food supply, and made sure they had enough to survive the journey. They would have to travel light, moving swiftly through the wilderness. Every moment counted. As they prepared to leave, Eliza felt a pang of sadness. The cabin had been their refuge, a place of warmth and family. But she knew they couldn't stay. Wyatt's threat was real, and it wouldn't be long before he returned with more men. The morning they left, the sun rose slowly, casting a golden light over the snow-covered landscape. Eliza held her children close, their small faces peeking out from the blankets. Chayton led the way, his steps sure and confident. He knew the land well, and Eliza trusted his instincts. They moved quickly, pushing through the snow with determination. The forest was dense, the trees standing like guardians around them. Eliza glanced back at the cabin one last time, a bittersweet farewell. It had been their home, but now it was time to move on. As they traveled, Chayton shared more of his past. He spoke of betrayal, of a time when he had been exiled from his band. He had trusted someone he shouldn't have, and the consequences had been severe. His story was one of loss and survival, much like Eliza's own. Eliza listened, understanding the pain of betrayal all too well. She had lost Samuel, and now she faced a threat from those who wanted to take everything from her. But she found strength in Chayton's story, in his resilience and determination. They were kindred spirits, bound by circumstance and choice. The journey was tiring, but they pressed on. Chayton led them through the forest, avoiding well-trodden paths and keeping to the shadows. They had to stay hidden to remain one step ahead of Wyatt and his men. After several days of travel, they reached an abandoned fort. It stood on a hill, surrounded by thick woods. The walls were worn and crumbling, but it offered shelter and a vantage point. It was a temporary haven, a place to regroup and plan their next move. Eliza explored the fort, taking stock of their surroundings. It was a relic of a past conflict, a reminder of the land's turbulent history. The walls were sturdy enough, providing a sense of security she hadn't felt in days. Inside the fort, Eliza found a small room that had once served as an office. Dust covered the surfaces, and old papers lay scattered on the floor. As she sorted through the debris, a letter caught her eye. It was addressed to Samuel, and her heart skipped a beat. The letter revealed a betrayal she hadn't anticipated. A friend, someone she had trusted, had been feeding information to Wyatt's employer, Victor Langston. Langston was a powerful land baron, hungry for control and wealth. The map was his target, a key to the land's untapped potential. Eliza felt a surge of anger and betrayal. She had been deceived, her trust shattered by someone she had considered an ally. The realization cut deep, but it also fueled her resolve. She couldn't let Langston win. She had to protect her family to ensure the map remained safe. Chayton found Eliza in the small room, the letter in her hands. He saw the pain in her eyes, the weight of the betrayal. She shared the contents with him, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. Together, they vowed to stand against Langston and his men. With the fort as their base, Eliza and Chayton began to plan. They knew they couldn't hide forever. Langston's reach was long and he wouldn't give up easily. They had to be ready for his next move to anticipate his actions and counter them. Eliza felt the burden of leadership, the responsibility of protecting her children and their future. But she wasn't alone. Chayton was by her side, his unwavering support a constant source of strength. They were a team, united by a common purpose. As days turned into weeks, Eliza and Chayton fortified the fort, preparing for whatever might come. They gathered supplies, trained for combat, and kept watch for signs of Langston's men. Every day was a battle of its own, a test of their resilience and resolve. Despite the challenges, Eliza found moments of peace. She watched Nathan and Grace play within the safety of the fort's walls, their laughter a balm to her weary soul. They were her reason for fighting, her motivation to keep going. Chayton was a steady presence, his calm demeanor a reassurance amid the chaos. He taught Eliza more about survival, about the land and its secrets. Their bond grew stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. Eliza knew their journey was far from over. The threat of Langston loomed large, a shadow over their fragile peace. But she was ready to face it, to stand against the forces that sought to take what was hers. The fort was their sanctuary, a place to regroup and gather strength. It was a symbol of their defiance, their refusal to bow to fear and greed. Together, Eliza and Chayton would fight for their future, for the land and the legacy they hoped to build. With each passing day, Eliza felt more prepared, more determined. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to walk it side by side with Chayton. They would face whatever came their way, armed with hope and courage. The land was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also full of promise. Eliza knew they had to protect it, to build a life for Nathan and Grace. The journey was long, but their resolve was unbreakable. Together, they would forge a new path, one that led to a brighter future. Eliza and Chayton settled into life at the fort. They worked together to make it more secure, always aware of the looming threat from Victor Langston. Every day was a new challenge, but they faced it with determination. The fort became their safe haven, a place where they could plan and prepare. Eliza knew they needed to trust each other completely. Their survival depended on it. Chayton was her ally, her friend, and she relied on his strength and knowledge. He taught her how to defend herself and the children. They practiced with weapons, honing their skills for the battle they knew was coming. Despite the tension, a sense of companionship grew between them. They had been through so much together, and their bond deepened with each passing day. Eliza respected Chayton's wisdom and courage, and she valued his presence in her life. One day, while exploring the fort, Eliza discovered a hidden passage. It was cleverly concealed, a narrow tunnel leading away from the main structure. She showed it to Chayton, knowing it could be their escape route if Langston's men found them. The passage was a secret, a potential lifeline in times of crisis. Eliza and Chayton agreed to keep it hidden, to use it only if absolutely necessary. It was a last resort, but knowing it was there gave Eliza some comfort. As the days went by, Eliza and Chayton focused on fortifying the fort and planning for the future. They knew they couldn't hide forever. Langston's reach was wide, and it was only a matter of time before he made his move. They had to be ready to face whatever came their way. Eliza found herself thinking more and more about the map. It was a burden, but also a source of hope. The spring it marked was valuable, a resource that could change their fortunes. But it was also a target, one that Langston would stop at nothing to claim. Chayton understood the map's significance. He knew the land well, and he respected its power. They talked often about what it meant, about how they could use it to unite the territory. It was a dream, a vision of a future where people could live and thrive together. Despite the constant threat, there were moments of peace. Eliza watched Nathan and Grace play within the fort's walls, their laughter a welcome sound. They were her reason for fighting, her motivation to keep going. She wanted a better future for them, a life free from fear and uncertainty. Chayton was always there, a steady presence by her side. His quiet strength was a source of comfort, and Eliza found herself relying on him more and more. They were a team, united by a common goal. As they prepared for Langston's inevitable pursuit, Eliza found herself reflecting on the past. She thought of Samuel, of the life they had planned together. She missed him deeply, but she knew she had to move forward. Her children needed her, and she couldn't let them down. Chayton shared more of his story, of the betrayal that had led to his exile. He spoke of a time when he had trusted someone he shouldn't have, and the pain that had followed. His journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought him here, to this moment. Eliza and Chayton's shared experiences created a bond that was unspoken but strong. They understood each other's pain, each other's hopes and dreams. They were partners in this fight, and they knew they could rely on each other. As tensions rose, so did their resolve. They were ready to face Langston, to stand against his greed and ambition. They had built something worth fighting for, a life and a future they were determined to protect. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Chayton spoke of his people, of the tribe he had left behind. He wanted to reach out to them to mend past wounds and seek their support. Eliza encouraged him, knowing that alliances were crucial in this fight. Chayton's decision to reconnect with his tribe was a big step, and it filled Eliza with hope. She knew the Comanche were strong and resourceful, and their support could make a difference. Together, they could stand against Langston and his men. The days turned into weeks, and the fort became a hub of activity. Eliza and Chayton worked tirelessly, gathering supplies and preparing for the confrontation they knew was inevitable. They had built a community, a place where people could come together and support each other. Eliza sent letters to nearby settlements, inviting them to join a council that would oversee the land's resources fairly. She hoped to unite the territory to create a future where everyone could thrive. It was a lofty goal, but one she was determined to pursue. Chayton's efforts to reconnect with his tribe were also bearing fruit. He had reached out to their leaders, seeking forgiveness and support. It was a difficult process, but one that was necessary for their cause. As the new alliances began to take shape, Eliza felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were building something important, something that could change the future of the territory. It was a dream worth fighting for, and she was ready to give it everything she had. The threat of Langston still loomed, but Eliza and Chayton were prepared. They had faced many challenges together, and they knew they could overcome whatever came their way. They were stronger now, united in their resolve. With each passing day, Eliza felt more hopeful. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of promise. Together, they would fight for their land, for their children, for the life they had built. The path was long, but they were ready to walk it side by side, armed with hope and courage. The day Langston's men arrived at the fort, the air was tense with anticipation. Eliza and Chayton had been preparing for this moment. They knew it would come. The fort had been fortified as much as possible, and the people within were ready to defend their home. As the sun rose, Eliza stood at the fort's entrance, her heart steady. She felt a mixture of fear and determination. She glanced at Nathan and Grace, playing nearby under the watchful eyes of their new friends. Their laughter was a reminder of why she was fighting. Chayton was by her side, calm and focused. He had spent days organizing their defenses, ensuring everyone knew their role. The settlers and Comanche who had joined them were ready. They had come together for this purpose, united against a common threat. The first sign of Langston's men was the distant sound of horses. A cloud of dust rose on the horizon, growing larger as they approached. Eliza's grip tightened on her weapon. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. The men stopped at the edge of the clearing. Langston was not among them, but his presence was felt. These men were his enforcers, sent to claim the land and the map by force. Their leader stepped forward, a man named Carter, known for his ruthlessness. Carter called out, demanding they surrender and hand over the map. His voice was loud, full of arrogance and contempt. Eliza felt a surge of anger, but she kept her composure. They would not give in to fear. Chayton stepped forward, speaking on behalf of the group. He told Carter they would not surrender. The land was theirs, and they would defend it. His words were met with jeers and laughter from the men, but Chayton showed no fear. The standoff was tense, the air heavy with expectation. Eliza felt the weight of the moment, the lives that depended on their actions. She took a deep breath, drawing strength from those around her. Carter gave the signal, and the attack began. The men charged, their weapons drawn. Eliza and the others stood their ground, ready to defend their home. The battle was fierce, each side fighting with determination and resolve. Eliza moved with purpose, her training with Chayton guiding her actions. She fought alongside the settlers and Comanche, each one committed to protecting what was theirs. The noise was overwhelming, the clash of weapons and shouts filling the air. In the chaos, Eliza faced her own demons. She thought of Samuel, of the life they had dreamed of building together. She felt his presence, his spirit guiding her. She fought with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to honor his memory. Chayton was a force on the battlefield, his skills as a hunter and warrior evident. He moved with precision, defending those around him. His presence was a rallying point, a symbol of their resistance. The battle raged on, both sides suffering losses. Eliza felt the exhaustion setting in, but she pushed through. She had to keep going, for Nathan and Grace, for the future they were fighting for. As the sun began to set, the tide of the battle turned. Langston's men were forced to retreat, unable to break through the fort's defenses. Their defeat was a victory for Eliza and her allies, but it came at a cost. The ground was littered with reminders of the day's violence. Eliza looked around at the faces of those who had fought beside her. They were weary, but there was a sense of triumph in their eyes. They had stood their ground and won, at least for now. Chayton joined her, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. They had done what they set out to do, defended their home and the people within it. But Eliza knew this was not the end. Langston would try again. He would not give up easily. As night fell, the fort was filled with a somber quiet. The wounded were tended to and the dead were honored. Eliza felt the weight of the day, the loss and the victory intertwined. She knew they had to stay vigilant, to be ready for whatever came next. Despite the challenges, Eliza felt hope. They had faced Langston's men and emerged stronger for it. They had proven they could stand together, united against a common threat. The bonds forged in battle were unbreakable. Chayton's presence was a comfort, a reminder that they were not alone. They had allies, people who believed in their cause. Together, they would continue to fight for the land and the future they wanted to build. Eliza spent the night reflecting on all that had happened. The fort had become a symbol of their defiance, their refusal to bow to greed and fear. It was a place of hope, a testament to their resilience. The path ahead was still uncertain, but Eliza felt ready to face it. With Chayton by her side, she was determined to protect her children, to build a life where they could thrive. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. As dawn broke, Eliza felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger for it. The land was theirs to defend, a legacy for Nathan and Grace. Together, they would continue to fight, to build a future filled with hope and possibility. After the battle, the fort became a place of healing and renewal. The victory had given Eliza, Chayton, and their allies a sense of hope and determination. They knew Langston would not give up, but they were ready to face whatever came next. Eliza focused on building a community within the fort. She wanted to ensure that everyone had a voice, a say in how they moved forward. The settlers and Comanche had fought side by side, and Eliza believed they could build a future together. She called a meeting, inviting representatives from each group to join a council. The council would oversee the land's resources, ensuring they were shared fairly. It was a bold idea, but one Eliza believed could unite the territory. The meeting was tense at first. Old grievances and mistrust lingered between the settlers and the Comanche. But Eliza spoke from the heart, urging them to put aside their differences. They had a chance to create something new, something better for their children. Chayton supported Eliza, his presence a bridge between the two groups. He spoke of the land, of its power and potential. He reminded them of the battle they had fought together, the bonds they had formed. His words carried weight, and slowly the tension eased. The council was formed, a mix of settlers and Comanche, each member committed to working for the common good. It was a small victory, a step towards the future they all wanted. Eliza felt a sense of pride, knowing they were on the right path. With the council in place, they turned their attention to the land. The map Samuel had left was a key, a guide to the resources they could share. The spring it marked was vital, a source of water that could sustain them all. Eliza suggested using the map not as a tool for control, but as a means to unite the territory. They could share the water, the land, and its bounty. It was a radical idea, but one that resonated with the council. They began to make plans, discussing how to distribute the water fairly. It was a complex task, but one they approached with determination. Eliza felt hopeful, seeing the cooperation and goodwill between the groups. Chayton reached out to his former tribe, seeking to mend past wounds and forge new alliances. He wanted to bring them into the fold, to show them the possibility of a shared future. It was a delicate process, but one he approached with patience and respect. As the weeks passed, the fort became a hub of activity. People came and went, bringing news and supplies. The council worked tirelessly, organizing resources and mediating disputes. It was a challenging task, but one that brought a sense of purpose and unity. Eliza watched as Nathan and Grace played with the other children, their laughter a reminder of why they were doing this. She wanted a better future for them, a life free from fear and uncertainty. The community they were building was a step towards that dream. The threat of Langston still loomed, but Eliza and Chayton were prepared. They kept the fort secure, always ready for any sign of his return. The battle had taught them the importance of vigilance and cooperation. Despite the challenges, Eliza felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They were making progress, building a future that was fair and just. The council was a testament to their determination, a symbol of what they could achieve together. Chayton's efforts to reconnect with his tribe bore fruit. They began to send representatives to the fort, eager to be part of the new community. It was a significant step, one that filled Eliza with hope. The alliances they were forming could change the future of the territory. As the new alliances took shape, Eliza felt the weight of responsibility. She was not just fighting for her family, but for everyone who called the frontier home. It was a daunting task, but one she faced with courage and determination. The fort became a place of learning and growth. Eliza organized lessons teaching the children about the land and its history. She wanted them to understand the importance of cooperation and respect. They were the future, and it was up to her to guide them. Chayton took on the role of mediator, helping to resolve disputes and foster understanding between the groups. His calm demeanor and wisdom were invaluable, and Eliza was grateful for his support. Together, they worked to create a community built on trust and shared purpose. It was not always easy, but the progress they made was worth the effort. Eliza felt a sense of hope and optimism knowing they were building something that could last. The land was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also full of promise. Eliza and Chayton were determined to protect it to ensure it remained a place of opportunity and hope. The journey was far from over, but they were ready to face it together. As the days turned to weeks, Eliza saw the fruits of their labor. The council was thriving and the community was growing stronger. They had faced many challenges, but their resolve had never wavered. Eliza knew there would be more battles, more obstacles to overcome. But with Chayton by her side and the support of the council, she was ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would continue to fight for their land, their future, and the legacy they hoped to build. The path was not easy, but it was one worth walking. Eliza felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing they were on the right track. The fort was more than just a place, it was a symbol of their resilience and determination. Together, they would continue to forge a new path forward, one filled with hope and possibility. The new council had begun its work at the fort, bringing together settlers and Comanche to manage the land's resources. Eliza was proud of what they had achieved, but she knew there would be challenges. Differences in culture and history created tensions that needed careful handling. Eliza and Chayton worked tirelessly to mediate disputes and build trust. They held regular meetings, encouraging open dialogue and cooperation. It was not always easy. Old animosities simmered beneath the surface and misunderstandings were common. One day, a disagreement broke out over access to the spring marked on Samuel's map. Both settlers and Comanche claimed priority, and the argument quickly escalated. Eliza stepped in, her voice calm but firm. She reminded them of their shared goals, urging them to find a solution together. Chayton supported Eliza, his presence a stabilizing force. He spoke of the land's significance, of the need to respect each other's rights. His words carried weight, and slowly the tension eased. They agreed to a compromise, ensuring fair access for all. Despite the challenges, progress was being made. The council was learning to work together, finding common ground in their shared vision for the future. Eliza felt hopeful, seeing the bonds of trust grow stronger each day. During this time, Eliza and Chayton's relationship deepened. They spent long hours discussing their plans, sharing their hopes and fears. Eliza found comfort in Chayton's presence, his steady support a constant reassurance. Yet, both were haunted by lingering doubts. Eliza struggled with the memory of Samuel, the life they had planned together. Moving forward felt like a betrayal, and guilt weighed heavily on her heart. She found herself torn between the past and the future. Chayton, too, faced his own demons. He grappled with his place in a world that had once rejected him. The path of exile had been long and painful, and he often questioned his role in the new community. But Eliza's trust and friendship gave him strength, and he was determined to find his place. Their connection grew stronger, built on mutual respect and understanding. They found solace in each other's company, their shared experiences creating a bond that was unspoken but powerful. Eliza knew she had to confront her fears. She couldn't continue carrying the burden of guilt and loss. Samuel would have wanted her to move forward, to find happiness and purpose. She had to honor his memory by living fully, embracing the life she was building. Chayton, too, was on a journey of healing. He reached out to the leaders of his tribe, seeking reconciliation and acceptance. It was a difficult process, but one that was necessary for his own peace of mind. Together, Eliza and Chayton faced their trials, supporting each other through the uncertainties. They knew the path was not easy, but they were ready to walk it side by side. As the council continued its work, the community at the fort grew stronger. People began to see the benefits of cooperation, of working together for the common good. The land was rich with promise, and they were determined to protect it. Eliza watched as Nathan and Grace thrived, their laughter a constant reminder of why she was fighting. They were her reason for everything, the future she was building. She wanted them to grow up in a world where peace and prosperity were possible. Chayton was a constant presence, his wisdom and strength invaluable to the community. He had found his place, and Eliza was grateful for his friendship. Together, they were making a difference, building a legacy for the generations to come. As the weeks turned into months, the fort became a symbol of hope and resilience. The council's work was far from over, but they were on the right path. Eliza felt a sense of satisfaction knowing they were creating something lasting and meaningful. The threat of Langston still loomed, but Eliza and Chayton were prepared. They had faced many challenges, but their resolve had never wavered. They knew they could overcome whatever came their way, united in their purpose. Eliza felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing they were building a future worth fighting for. The path was long, but she was ready to walk it side by side with Chayton. Together, they would continue to forge a new path forward, one filled with hope and possibility. As the community at the fort continued to grow, Eliza and Chayton found moments of peace amid the chaos. They cherished these times, knowing they were building something important. The bonds they had formed were strong, a testament to their determination and courage. Eliza knew the journey was far from over, but she was ready to face it. With Chayton by her side, she felt hopeful and optimistic. They had come a long way, and the future was bright with promise. Together, they would continue to fight for their land, their children, and the life they were building. The path was not easy, but it was one worth walking, filled with hope and possibility. Life at the fort continued to evolve. Eliza, Chayton, and the council worked tirelessly to ensure the community thrived. Yet, they knew Victor Langston would not give up easily. He had tried to take the land by force and failed, but his ambition was relentless. One morning, a rider approached the fort with urgent news. Langston was making a new attempt to claim the land. This time, he was using legal means. He had filed a claim, backed by forged documents, asserting his right to the territory. It was a cunning move, one that required a different kind of battle. Eliza gathered the council. They needed a plan to counter Langston's actions. The legal system was complex, but they had to fight for their rights. The land was theirs, and they would not let it be taken so easily. Chayton stood by Eliza, his support unwavering. They discussed their options, seeking advice from those who understood the law. It was a daunting task, but they were determined to protect what they had built. Eliza knew she needed evidence to challenge Langston's claim. She combed through every document, every piece of paper that might help their case. She found letters and agreements, proof of their rightful ownership. The council decided to take the fight to the courts. It was a new kind of battle, one fought with words and documents instead of weapons. They gathered their evidence, preparing to stand before a judge and argue their case. As the day of the hearing approached, Eliza felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She was not used to this kind of fight, but she knew it was important. The future of the community depended on it. Chayton was a constant presence, offering encouragement and support. He believed in Eliza, in her ability to stand up for their rights. His faith gave her strength, bolstering her resolve. On the day of the hearing, Eliza traveled to the courthouse with Chayton and members of the council. The building was imposing, a symbol of the law and order they hoped would protect them. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Langston's lawyer presented their forged documents, arguing for his client's claim. Eliza listened, her heart pounding in her chest. But she knew the truth was on their side. When it was her turn to speak, Eliza rose with confidence. She presented their evidence, the letters and agreements that proved their ownership. She spoke with passion, telling the story of their struggle and determination to build a future for their community. The judge listened carefully, weighing the evidence and arguments. Eliza watched his face, hoping to see a sign of understanding. She knew the decision was crucial, not just for her, but for everyone at the fort. As the proceedings continued, Eliza felt a sense of calm. She had done everything she could, and now it was in the hands of the court. She glanced at Chayton, finding reassurance in his steady gaze. The judge took time to deliberate, the courtroom silent with anticipation. When he finally spoke, his words were clear and decisive. The evidence was compelling, and Langston's claim was dismissed. The land belonged to the community, the rightful owners. Relief washed over Eliza, a weight lifting from her shoulders. They had won not just for themselves, but for the future they were building. The courtroom erupted in applause, the council members celebrating their victory. Chayton smiled, his eyes filled with pride and gratitude. Eliza had stood firm, and together they had protected their home. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to their resilience and determination. As they left the courthouse, Eliza felt a renewed sense of hope. They had faced a formidable challenge and emerged victorious. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she knew they were on the right track. Back at the fort, the news of their victory spread quickly. The community celebrated, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that their land was safe. It was a time of joy and reflection, a chance to look to the future with optimism. Eliza and Chayton stood together, watching the celebration unfold. They had come a long way, and their journey was far from over. But they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their purpose. The fort was more than just a place, it was a symbol of their resilience and determination. It represented the future they were building, a legacy for Nathan, Grace, and all who called the frontier home. As the sun set, Eliza felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had fought for her family, for the land, and for the life they were creating. With Chayton by her side, she knew they could achieve anything. The path was not easy, but it was one worth walking. Together, they would continue to forge a new path forward, one filled with hope and possibility. The future was bright, and they were ready to embrace it, side by side, as they continued their journey in this wild and beautiful land. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.